Hey, John Hickok here. I know what you're thinking right now. What? Who's this guy? Okay, I'll explain that in just a second. First, before I am. So, who am I? Some of you already know who I am. Of course, John from behind the camera. My dad's son, Hickok 45. Maybe you can see the resemblance. So, this is a gun that I actually purchased from Bud's Gun Shop when we were, I guess it was the last time we were up there in the Lexington location. And Dad was saying that I should just do this video over here on the main Hickok 45 channel. So I wandered off from the Hickok 45 and Son channel reservation, and I came over in front of the camera over here at Hickok 45. So that's what I'm doing, and that's who I am. And this is a really cool gun. Just definitely had to get this thing on camera one way or the other. It has several names. It's the SP1, specifically SP1 Carbine, and it's called lots of different things. Car 15. It's been called the civilian Colt Commando. There's another name I've heard for it, but really it's the Colt AR-15 model SP1. And there's two different SP1s, which the SP1 is. It gets kind of tricky, right? I did a lot of research on this online, and like all guns, it's very complicated about when certain guns are made and when they change model numbers. It gets a little crazy, but in general, the SP1s tend to be civilian versions of the M16 variants, A1 series, right? That's what they tend to be, and this one is kind of the carbine version of it. Like, you may have seen these in movies, like Navy SEALs in Vietnam, I think, used some variation of this. One reason they call it the Colt Commando was because it was designed for the more elite special forces units and different applications like that, because it does have the collapsible stock. It's only one position, closed and open. That's all you got with this one. And it's actually aluminum, which is kind of interesting. It's aluminum and has some kind of special coating on it. Can't remember what that was. I remember looking that up, but it has a lot of differences that you'll just notice right off the bat that really set it apart from any of the ARs in the past 10 to 15 or even 20 years, where you don't have this raised area up here around the mag release. There's no forward assist. Which some of the newer ARs are starting to not have those, because a lot of people say that there's no need for it. I'm not 100% sure what my take is on that, but I don't mind having one on there. Now, some people will say that on these SP1s that don't have the forward assist, that it's because it predates the forward assist, and that's not necessarily true. You can see the bolt here has the cuts for the forward assist. The reason that a lot of these SP1s don't have the forward assist is because they didn't think, when Colt was producing these for the civilian market, they didn't think that civilians cared about it or that they would need it, and it was a cost-cutting thing. And then around the time that the A2 started coming around, that's when they put the forward assist on the civilian guns. But let me go ahead and just shoot this thing a few times, and maybe I'll say some more stuff about it. Just a really cool looking gun. It was just the ultimate classic looking AR. I was so happy to find it. Okay, now I'm shooting Federal 223 ammo. It doesn't say 5.56 anywhere on the gun, but the general consensus is that these are basically just mil-spec guns, so you can shoot 5.56 no problem. I think that comes from the fact that I don't think there was any 5.56 on the civilian market when this gun came out, but I'll talk some more about that, the time period and all that stuff. All right, let's take out a 2-liter. Very light gun. Make sure I don't hit a animal behind that. Kind of hard to see the sights. One thing that it's interesting about these older ARs, there's a, I don't know, I guess it's just the spring tension or something, but there's a different feeling that you get when you shoot these things. It just feels, it's hard to explain. The recoil just feels slightly different. I know with Dad's A2 that you may have seen in some videos, you get this weird twang sound almost in your ear, which is kind of cool actually. I think it's kind of cool, but just because it's different. But in this one you don't really get the twang, but you have that same kind of feel. It almost feels like the bolt is moving slower, which doesn't make sense because I fired one of these guns, and you actually probably have seen it on the channel before. Let's see, we did, I think it was M4 versus Watermelon, something like that. We had a Car 15 that had been converted to full auto prior to the 86 ban, and that thing just, the rate of fire was just insane. So I'm not sure what that is, but they have an interesting feel. That's another thing about these that's interesting. A bunch of these guns were converted into transferable machine guns prior to the 86 ban, because there's something about these things where you didn't have to do any milling or really hardly anything to the gun to make it a full auto. You just drop in the trigger and the sear and all that stuff, and it's good to go. So that's one interesting thing about these. And let's see, what else was I going to tell you about it? Let me grab another mag. As far as the time period on this gun, I did a bunch of research on the serial number, and it seems like, by my best estimate, based on everything I read, that this particular gun came out in the fall of 1982. It was around when this gun came out, so it would have been one of the later of the SP1s. Some other just really obvious things that you don't see on modern ARs. You don't have this big brass deflector, of course, kind of more the low profile, which from what I hear is pretty undesirable for left-handed shooters. And then also these guns weren't, they didn't have all the modularity of these things in mind when they were building these back in the day. So they had a screw to take this upper off. It was just not quite as simple as some of the newer ones where you can just pop the pin out and it's a captured pin, and swapping out the upper and lower is I don't know, a little easier on the newer ones. And of course the fixed sight, that's the thing that probably jumps out at most of you the most, is the fact that you have this carry handle still with just a fixed iron sights. So your best opportunity for a better sighting system on this gun would just be to mount a red dot or a scope or something on top of there, which you're really maximizing the distance when you do that between the barrel and your line of sight. But they used to do that for a lot of years and it worked out fine. So I guess that works pretty well. And of course the bayonet lug. One thing about this gun too is this gun was held in a very high regard for a while because of some of the crazy gun bans that happened. And I believe it was '94 when we had the crime bill, as they called it. It's funny, laws have a way of approaching us as friendly sounding things. But it sunset, of course, in '94, I believe it was. But during that 10-year span, this gun was considered pre-ban. And you still hear that term occasionally, talking about stuff like this. It's kind of irrelevant now. But they had to start producing ARs without bayonet lugs, and they had to have a pinned flash hider on it, all that stuff. And then even the collapsible stocks was a big deal. So one of these guns was a really high priced find. There was a lot of value to the way this thing was set up for a while, but it's really not a big deal anymore because so many of the new guns that have been produced over the past 10 to 15 years have all that stuff on them. But now as more time has passed, now these things have value just because they're old and collectible, and there's just not that many of them around anymore. Of course, it's got the A1 flash hider, which the big difference between it and the A2 is it's just completely open on all sides. You can see that. And it's got the A1 grip on it. There's a little hole here. I'm guessing for to be honest, I'm not sure what it's for. Lanyard, maybe something like that. But it's just a really interesting gun, and it's very light. It's about as light as some of those really new, especially like the 3-gun ARs that people are building nowadays. They just weigh almost nothing. I mean, it feels like a toy. It's easy to imagine how, you know, some of these guys in the 60s, especially career military guys, maybe they were in their mid 40s when Vietnam happened, and somebody put one of these things in their hand, or the full length model with the triangle forend. I mean, I can easily imagine why they look at these things like, what is this plastic toy? Give me a real gun like a Garand or an M14. I can easily see how they had that mentality, and maybe some of them still do. But I'll tell you, these ARs are pretty impressive for just the amount of firepower that you can have as it relates to how much ammo you can carry. Of course, shot for shot, the 308 or the 30-06 is going to give you more bang for your buck, but ammo gets really heavy. You can carry a lot of 5.56 ammo on your person, and I think that there's some value in that. Of course, people argue about the stopping power of the round, which that discussion definitely has some validity for sure. But I like the round, and it's a cool gun. Shoot it again. Let's see. Just that propane. ARs definitely have a distinctive feel when you fire that last round, no question about it. Let's see if there's anything else that I was planning on telling you guys about this, because I've seen some of the older models of this, even in this Commando carbine setup, actually had the triangle forend on it. Let's see, I forget exactly how long they made these things. I think they started making this version of it maybe in the 70s. I know the SP1 goes back. I saw, let's see, I think way back into the 60s, they started making the SP1s. Another thing too, for some reference, of course, I didn't live through these days. I'm only 27 years old, but I just from Dad sharing his experiences with me and stuff that I've read and people I've talked to, it's easy to forget how ARs were perceived back in the 80s or the 70s, or even in the 60s, and maybe a little bit even in the 90s, because they're so commonplace now. People hunt with them. Gun shops are just loaded with them. Everybody has them. If you're into guns at all, ARs are just not a big deal. They're everywhere. But back even in the 80s, I mean, if you had this gun was, someone could have bought this off the shelf in 1982. You had this gun in your collection in the 80s, you were a pretty serious gun guy. Most people, even that were into guns, if you said, hey, check this out, they would have been, wow, that's really impressive. They would have been surprised that you had something like that possibly. Just not a lot of people had them. And it's interesting how much things have changed, and it's great. It's great that so many people have ARs in their house and that they aren't a big deal anymore. But it's still interesting to note that at the time this thing came out, it was a pretty serious gun. You were a serious dude if you have one of these, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So it's kind of cool. It's kind of cool to have one of the originals to an extent. But well, I guess that was pretty much all I was going to tell you. Let me shoot this last mag. just because it's here, so why not? But it's got a pencil thin barrel. That's one thing I meant to tell you. Very thin. There's a little piece of a center block on that barrel. Let me see if I can pick that one off. If I can see the sight. All right. Alright, this thing's a lot of fun to shoot. Definitely, if you are interested in history at all, or you collect guns, or you like ARs, definitely pick one of these up, either this model or the full-length model SP1, or even the A2s like the one Dad has. So it's really cool to have one of these older ARs set up how they used to be. It's just really cool. And even there's somebody, I can't think of who it is now. Somebody makes one that's supposed to look like a classic AR, but yet it doesn't have a lot of the obvious features. So just get the real deal. You know, if you want a classic AR, just go out and buy an old one. They're out there. You can find them. So anyways, really cool gun. I'm glad to have been able to purchase it, and thanks for checking out the first time ever for me doing a full review on the Hickok 45 channel. And you know, Dad and I have been doing this for the past 7 years almost now, and it's been a lot of fun. I appreciate all you guys watching. You don't get to see me very often, but see your comments, and I appreciate all your kind words, and maybe I'll see you again sometime.
We'd like to thank one of our sponsors, SDI, the Sonoran Desert Institute. SDI has fully accredited distance learning programs where you can get certified in gunsmithing or even an associate's degree in firearms technology. Of course, the study includes hands-on experience, which is important, of course. So check it out. Go to sdi.edu or just click on the link in the description. Okay. And also, we'd like to remind you to check out the Hickok 45 Facebook page and the Hickok 45 and Son channel and its Facebook page, as well as Gun Culture Radio on iTunes. Now, remember all this, because I'm coming to your house randomly over the next year or two to give you a quiz on it, okay? Thank you.